With Dunkin' Go-Tos, you can get a great deal on 2 of your favorites, like 2 egg and cheese wraps for $2, 2 bagels with cream cheese spread for $4, and 2 bacon, egg, and cheese croissants for $5. In my opinion, it's a deal that's pretty tough to beat. That's just if you want my go-to cents. If you don't want my go-to cents, it's go too late. Dunkin' Go-Tos, a great deal for $2, $4, or $5. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary. Limited time offer. Exclusions apply.
Therapy, I'm a walking travesty, but I'm smiling at everything. Therapy, you were never a friend to
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Source Material. Well, you're coming at you. This right here is going to be a controversial subject. We're going to be discussing a very recent story that just released from DC Comics. And I want to go ahead real quick, put out there that this is your spoiler warning if you've tuned into this show and you've never listened to a show before, because, you know, Mark Radulich, from what I understand, Podcoin is just grabbing us listeners by the hundreds, possibly.
Oh, Podcoin is the Pied Piper, and we have listeners lined up around the block parading through the village, my friend.
All right. Well, so this may possibly be your first ever Source Material Comics podcast. We're pretty much a book club for comics. We sit down, we talk about what happens in the story arc, and we discuss our feelings on said story arc, characters, all the whatnot in between. Like I said, this has just got done completing this story just recently. So again, you know, if you want to read it, come back. We're here. We're here for you. So let's get into introducing the guest. On the panel tonight, we have a total of 5 people. Myself, Jesse Starcher, the man you just heard, Mark Radulich. Mark Radulich, are you ready to talk heroes in crisis?
Ready and willing, Jack.
That's what I like to hear. And then, coming all the way from the Great White North, his name is Chris Bailey, but he will be referred to as Hero right here on the Source Material podcast. Hero has joined us, and are you ready, sir, to talk some heroes in crisis?
Bros before heroes, gentlemen. Bros before heroes. And the only thing that I've got, I heard the groans in the background. Isn't that great? What a start to the podcast. Don't forget, we've got some action and fun, and we might learn something when we get done.
All right, I love to hear that. Love to hear it. And he is returning from our last podcast that we discussed some kaiju. That's correct. Godzilla, Kingdom of Monsters. Evan Bevins, welcome back to the podcast. Are you ready to talk some heroes in crisis?
I thought this was the Godzilla versus Charles Barkley panel.
Oh, wrong door, sir. Wrong podcast.
Okay, my bad. Yeah, I read Heroes in Crisis.
All right. All right. I hope you have your notes ready. And then Chris Sheehan has come back to the Source Material podcast as well.
Hey.
What's out, man? How are you doing? And are you ready to talk about some heroes in crisis?
Well, you know, about a year ago, Reggie and I did Barkley and Godzilla, and that was a lot more fun than I think this is going to be.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's like show number 2 this week. I've got to go and find now. So exciting. Well, like I said, this is kind of controversial. It's a lot of passion behind the feelings after this story arc was done and where it was going. I mean,
is that what we're calling it? A man writes a story that you don't particularly enjoy or you feel doesn't represent the character well, and you send him a death threat.
Okay.
Or the reverse is you just sent him a mean tweet and he perceived it as a death threat. And
He
neither
reported
case,
it anyway, yeah.
I would not refer to either one as passion. I would refer to both as get a life.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna be talking about that in depth, I imagine, here at some point. So, but first off, Heroes in Crisis, Mark Radulich. I mean, you chose this book just based upon the buzz about it, right?
I totally chose this because I wasn't following it. We tend to not do a lot of the brand new stuff. We tend to wait and let things percolate. Christ, we just did the Dark Phoenix saga. We like to wait.
The time was right, though. I really
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, no, I mean, we do a lot of stuff associated with feature motion pictures and TV shows, but occasionally we do the oddball of something that's either making news or is creating a stir of some kind, or Jesse just wants to see if I'm going to react to the Flintstones, you know, any one of those categories. When the whole story broke that Tom King was receiving death threats, and mind you, I enjoyed Tom King's Batman. The wedding issue sucked, but the first 4 volumes of the Tom King Batman trade paperbacks, the Rebirth era, I enjoyed those. I thought they were pretty good. It was Tom King that also did the Vision, right, Jesse?
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you. The Tom King run on the Vision was one of the best things I've ever read. So when you have the situation where you don't particularly hate this author, and then you hear he's receiving death threats, suddenly you've piqued my interest. And we took the first available spot we had on the calendar, and we decided to talk about this Heroes in Crisis once it wrapped up.
Okay, all right. So if you head over to the wiki, just as Mark said, this was written by Tom King. But this is one of the big events. And when you hear DC event, the word crisis comes to mind. I know that when you put crisis in the title of a book coming from DC, that holds a lot of weight. So when I first heard about this, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be one of them deals. We're bringing everybody into it, and just the typical crisis fare that I thought was going to be happening. But it turns out it's a little bit more low-key than that. What I'll do real quick is I'm going to synopsis what happened. So I wrote a little bit of a paragraph here. This is 9 issues, came out September of 2018, went to May of 2019. Believe me, this is complete nutshell stuff. We might bring up some specifics as we talk. So here we go. Synopsis first, and then we'll hit talking points and all that. So Batman, I believe it was Batman. He's built a therapeutic getaway for heroes called Sanctuary. So if you're a fan of Star Trek, think of the holodeck, a holodeck type of environment mixed with Big Brother confessionals, focusing on mental healing for heroes that have suffered some type of trauma, or just a place to set your mind at ease after dealing with the villains of the day. When a tragic event occurs, leaving some heroes that were visiting Sanctuary dead, including Arsenal, Blue Jay, Commander Steel, Hotspot, Lagoon Boy, Gunfire, Red Devil, Narc, Protector, Tattooed Man, Wally West, and Poison Ivy. That leaves Harley Quinn and Booster Gold as survivors, each believing the other to be the murderer. But as time passes, it is revealed that all is not as it seemed. The event that killed our heroes appears to be a catastrophic, non-controlled release of the Speed Force due to a grief-stricken Wally West. A Wally who is still trying to come to grips with the loss of his family after reappearing in the current DC universe. More on that in a minute. And also viewing the Sanctuary confession tapes of other heroes detailing their own tragic lives. Realizing what he had done, Wally makes a series of hasty decisions, in quotes, to travel 5 days to the future and kill himself in order to leave his body so that he appears to have been a victim. During those 5 days, Wally took steps to make the world aware of Sanctuary. Remember, it was a big secret going up to this, and then Wally decided to kind of let the cat out of the bag about this Sanctuary for heroes. An attempt to show that even heroes suffer and the importance it is to get help before something bad may happen. During this, Booster Gold, Harley Quinn, Blue Beetle, and it's Batgirl?
Indeed.
Okay, Batgirl. Find out what has happened and come up with a plan to help Wally close the time loop without killing himself. By the end of the series, Mark, remember how I told you I love time travel?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy. This one pushed the limits. By the end of the series, Wally West turns himself in and is in a prison facing the consequences of the deaths on his hands. Yet, as the closing pages tell us, hope is not lost. After all of this, hope continues on. So there you go. That's my synopsis for what I read in the 9 issues of Heroes in Crisis. So first off, I'm going to throw it to our good buddy Chris Sheehan here. You have the floor, sir, because I mentioned Wally West and what has occurred up to this point. He showed back up in Rebirth, and I wanted to kind of give our listeners a better understanding because Lord knows I know the character, but I certainly do not know the ins and outs of this character.
All right, it's time for some Flash facts. This is Wallace Rudolph West. First appearance, Flash number 110, December 1959 cover date. He was created by John Broome and Carmine Infantino. He's the nephew of Iris West, and he's the #1 Flash fan. Now, if anybody's got any experience doing experiments, external validity of an experiment is predicated in repeatability. So, which is to say, Wally West's origin is exactly the same as Barry Allen's. The chemicals get zapped by lightning, he gets real fast. They even wear the same costume for a little while there, just a smaller version, and that's until Wally gets his yellow costume in Flash number 135, March 1963 cover date. Wally became a charter member of the Teen Titans in Brave and the Bold number 54, June-July 1964 cover date. In that, he, Robin, and Aqualad teamed up to take down Mr. Twister, and they also reunited the children Children and the adults of Hatton Corners. A lot of those early Titan stories are kind of built with kids and adults don't understand one another, and they just really need to rap to get everything underway, you know.
Parents just don't understand.
It's true. But at the end of that first issue, the kids had signs that said, "Adults, we love them." So I guess it all worked out in the end. The Titans would be joined by a whole lot of young heroes, and a few of them will be killed in this very event we're going to discuss. The Teen Titans title would be canceled twice, and the team would eventually disband. Wally began looking toward the future, and he came to the realization that superheroing was not going to be part of it. He instead returned home to Blue Valley, Nebraska, and he decided to take his college studies a bit more seriously. And his parents, as you might imagine, were very supportive of this decision. They were very supportive overall, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Now, the new Teen Titans would launch, and they first appeared in DC Comics Presents number 26. That's October 1980 cover date, and around that time, Wally returned to the tights. He didn't remain for long, however, because his powers began affecting him physically, which is to say, if he kept running, he would have died. Also, he started making time with a girl named Frances Kane. She'd eventually become the Rogue Magenta. Now, Wally would officially quit the Teen Titans and retire from superheroing in New Teen Titans number 39. That was February 1984 cover date. And, for such a tremendous event in this young man's life, he got about 5 seconds worth of send-off because right after he said that, Dick Grayson retired his Robin identity. So everybody was turned to Dick at that point. The very same conversation, no less. So it looked like Wally was about to whimper into the sunset until Crisis on Infinite Earths, the first Crisis. This was a 12-issue maxi series written by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. Well, if you want to check out Cosmic Treadmill episodes 50 through 54, you can hear about 13 or 14 hours of a Crisis talk here.
Hey.
The script for Crisis on Infinite Earths, the podcast, has more pages than Crisis on Infinite Earths. So
impressive.
So there you go. Now, in Crisis, this is Crisis on Infinite Earths number 8, November 1985 cover date. Now, in that issue, Barry Allen sacrifices himself to save the universe. And, the world needs a Flash, so Wally became that guy. But it almost wasn't to be because Marv Wolfman actually introduced the character he intended to replace Barry as the Flash. And that was a fella, he was a Star Labs technician named Mackenzie Ryan. And thankfully, that didn't happen. So Wally officially dons the tights. He takes over as the Flash during DC's Legends event. That was in 1986. From here, he'd get his own title, Flash Volume 2. In the very first issue of that, he'd win the New York State Lottery and become a millionaire. This didn't last terribly long, but he was a real D-bag during this stretch. Early in the series, Millennium happened. That was a DC event, 1987, and in it, Wally West's father, Rudolph West, was revealed to be a Manhunter, which is a robot from the distant past, and that didn't stick. Wally would eventually have his first face-off with the Rogues. This was Flash Volume 2, number 19, December 1988. He would join the Justice League Europe, and he would meet a Keystone City reporter named Linda Park. This was Flash Volume 2, number 28, July 1989 cover date. Their relationship was pretty contentious at first, but they'd eventually come around to one another. We'll jump ahead a few years. He had a 0 hour, and in it, Wally died, because Crisis Protocol demands a Flash death, which I guess might be a spoiler alert for what we're going to talk about. But this didn't stick. And we're not here yet, but Wally would also die during Infinite Crisis in 2005 or so. That death would stick for a little while, just long enough for Bart Allen to become the Flash, get his own title, and be canceled. Jumping back a little bit, Wally and Linda would eventually get married. They would get yoinked into hell and threatened with having to exchange their love to save Keystone City. And this happened over a decade before Peter and Mary Jane would do the same thing for something far less. Also, after Wally was sucked into the Speed Force, which also didn't stick. I think this was around the time that they decided that there was something called a Speed Force. After Wally and Linda finally got married, Identity Crisis occurred, during which Wally shockingly didn't die. But this was a story that was based on the power of secret identities. If people know who your loved ones are and you're a superhero, they're in danger. I haven't mentioned it yet, but for much of his career, Wally operated in public. Everybody knew Wally West was the Flash. He would put that genie back in the bottle after Flash Volume 2, number 200, and again, that was a half decade before Peter Parker did it. Linda would give birth to a pair of twins in Flash Volume 2, number 225, October 2005 cover date. Wally would get the reins back from Bart, which was pretty easy because Bart was dead. This was all Flash Flash number 1, September 2007 cover date. Then Final Crisis happens, and Wally West survived it. Actually, this crisis didn't take a Flash away, but gave one back. This was the return of Barry Allen. Jump into the Flash Rebirth miniseries, which reestablished Barry as the guy and pushed Wally all the way into the background, where I think a lot of people felt he belonged. And then Flashpoint happened, and Wally was no more.
He disappears. Well, out of continuity. At this point, after Flashpoint occurs, this is when the New 52 happens, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. With all of that history behind this character, tell me about your attachment to Wally West. Were you one of these people that just were, this was your Flash, or tell me about it?
Yes, sir. Wally West was my Flash. Barry died when I was 5 years old, so I wasn't a Barry guy. I did appreciate Barry for being, there was a saying on the old Usenet thing where it was, you had Saint Barry, because everybody remembered Barry fondly. He was just the perfect guy. He was the most righteous guy. Wally was always trying to live up to that. And I mean, there was even an arc where a guy who looked a lot like Barry came back to life, and Wally had to deal with not being able to match up to his idol. I really think that it put Wally in a different hierarchy. It put him in the Titan hierarchy. He's just under Justice League, even though he was part of the Justice League at the time. He wasn't at the level that Barry was at, and I really appreciated that for what it was. But Wally being taken away, that really bothered me. They did bring Wallace West in, the new one in the New 52, which was yes, to say the very least. But I'm pretty much a soft touch when it comes to certain characters, and in that Rebirth issue where Wally does come back, I actually did a podcast about that one several months ago, and it took several takes because I couldn't get through it. Yeah. I mean, Wally's a very important character to me, and to a lot of people, and he was a representation. We talked about hope. The hope isn't gone. Wally was the hope. If we go back to the first press release of Rebirth, it was a Jeff Johns video, and in it he says, "I love the DC universe. I love this place, but there's something missing." And when he said that, it panned through comic covers, and one of those covers was Flash Volume 2, number 1. Jeff Johns actually is the guy who kind of took the reins from Mark Waid and put Wally on the next level. He had like a 6 or 7 year run with the character, no pun intended. He's a very important character, and the fact that he wasn't there, it just felt wrong, and it felt pandering, because I mean, then the Flash TV show happened, and you got it, and then the diversity stuff comes through, and you have to have the certain kind of Flash, the certain kind of Wally. It just felt very ham-fisted and disrespectful to such a long tenured character. I mean, he's over a half century old at this point.
Mm-hmm. Evan Bevins.
Pretty much what Chris said. Wally West was my Flash. Barry Allen was the patron saint of the DC universe, who, with the exception of one comic I got at a flea market, his biggest contribution was being dead. That's not to disrespect the people who like Barry, but those are the stories I read. I still don't fully understand why they brought Barry back. And and then Wally was just kind of in limbo for a while there, and he was like the most obvious missing piece in the New 52. When he showed up in Heroes in Crisis, just in the body count, seemingly offhand, I was like, wait a minute, I thought Wally was the whole point of Rebirth.
Evan, were you there with me the night of, I think you were, at Asylum's Rebirth event, right? And what were your thoughts when you read that issue? Because I read it, and man, I'll tell you right now, not being as attached to this character, it still tugged at my heartstrings.
I was more surprised that they were blaming Watchmen for all the problems that ever happened in comics, when the actual problem with comics is people trying to recreate Watchmen and not understanding it. Mm-hmm. But that's neither here nor there. No, I thought it was great. I had long been remarking about DC's antagonistic attitude toward Hope, which culminated, and I don't remember if this was pre or post New 52, but the Green Lantern continuity didn't change much, where they literally killed all the Blue Lanterns. The Blue Lanterns, of course, representing Hope on the emotional spectrum. I mean, if that's not a very thin metaphor, hey, we just killed Hope, quite literally. So yeah, that was always my touchstone for how dark DC was getting. At that point, I accepted Barry. I obviously didn't have the attachment that some people had to Wally, but he was the only Flash Flash I knew, except for that brief period where Bart Allen stopped being fun and started being the Flash. So, I was curious about what they were going to do with it, and a little surprised that he seemed to have died off panel.
Hero, tell me about Wally West in your life, bro.
So Wally West is the EC3 of superhero characters.
Oh, no.
He has been beaten around, mistreated, brought in and out of continuity at will. He's like the brand new toy you got for your birthday, and as soon as you open it, your friend kicks it down the street 100 times, and you find it 3 years later in a tattered condition. That's Wally West. I was a huge Flash fan. I mean, I remember first when I got my first Superpowers figure. The first figure I got was the Flash. I loved it. So then I saw Barry Allen die in Crisis, and of course, Wally West took over. And, I was a big Kid Flash fan, so to see Kid Flash advance into Flash was huge for me. So, just seeing him get his own solo series in 87, I bought the shit out of that title. Loved it. He had the Bruce Wayne thing going on. He was a millionaire all of a sudden. He was hanging out with the hot chicks. This guy had it all going on. He was a bit of a douchebag. His secret origin was out in the public, and then it started to go off the rails. Then we had different things like they would change his costume. They'd mess a little bit with his origin because it was, very tightly linked with Barry Allen's. I mean, it was literally, as Chris said, it was a mirror. Like it was just, another character with the exact same origin. They even touch on that in Heroes in Crisis. They sort of poke fun at that here. Then Infinite Crisis came around, and they just, they decide we're going to ship Wally West and his little family, who's, he's finally got it going on. Hey, let's throw him in an alternate dimension, and we'll just throw Bart Allen in the role. Of course, I need not tell you how big of a disaster that was, and all of a sudden, people were demanding Wally back, as they would over and over and over throughout the years. Mm-hmm. So he comes back in this Lightning Saga thing. He's aged a little bit, and of course he's changed a little bit unrecognizable. Of course, I need not tell you what happens with Flashpoint Rebirth and the different things. And just to finally get Wally back in Rebirth, you're finally like, oh my God, Wally is back, and I can finally be at peace, and we can enjoy the character once again. And then Heroes in Crisis hits, and they take the toy and they kick it down the fucking street again.
To watch him go through the events in this book, it's rough. And I, like I said, I didn't grow up reading Flash comics, and I knew who Barry Allen was. I knew who Wally West was, but it was rare that I had my hands on a DC comic, especially as I was a kid or a teen. I was the X-Men, X Factor, all the mutant books. So I wasn't touching DC at the time. I just knew the big core characters. So I didn't really have, that much invested in it. And then when Rebirth happened, I remember the internet lighting up and listening to just people around me talk about they finally brought him back. And I remember reading it and just, oh, this is great. This is a company understanding their fan base and what they want and giving it to them. Finally.
Oh my God.
Wow. What's the puppet dog's name on Conan O'Brien who...
Triumph the Unsolved Comic Dog.
Yes.
Yeah. He does the pregnant pause before he says, "For me to poop on," which apparently is DC's new motto.
As in, Wally West is a great character. For me to poop on.
Yes. Thank you.
So, Mark, I want to ask you, I already know the answer to this, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell us about your history with Wally West, and then I want you to kind of lead into Wally West in this story and what your thoughts were. So go ahead.
All right. Well, Wally West is played by Keenan Lonsdale on the Flash CW show. And that's what I know of Wally West. Oh, he was also on a really funny episode of the new Teen Titans cartoon where they were trying to find a new leader for the Teen Titans, and they dumped Robin for half an episode, and they brought in a really obnoxious Wally West. Other than the Hulk, the Flash is my son's favorite superhero because he likes to run fast.
All right.
How's that? Is that good?
Good enough. All right.
Moving
on.
That's the problem with this is not only does what happens to this character not really affect me because they shot the fucking Hulk in the head with an arrow. I mean, after, that bothered me.
Yeah.
That I had some real difficulties with. The Batman Catwoman wedding, I mean, we did an entire show where I was ready to throw my desk. esque. This one I have no real relationship with the Flash character. He was the funny character on the Justice League cartoon show. I didn't really read Flash comics. The idea of a comic book character whose power is he runs fast didn't appeal to me. I get it now. He can do magic with his running, but it was just not a character that really grabbed me. I didn't really have any real familiarity with Wally West in this comic book, and so I was kind of, I was following the Harley stuff, and that was fine. I was kind of following the Booster Gold stuff. I know he's a bit of a goof character, but then they did the big reveal, and I was like, okay, well, I think I wrote it on Facebook. I'm like, yeah, I get why people sent him death threats now. Not that I say that was the right thing to do. Obviously, that's horrible, and those people need to not have a Twitter account or an internet. So with that being said, I saw why people were reacting, because I know he's a beloved character, and I did do a little reading on it. But to me, it was like that reveal could have been any character, and I don't think it would have changed the story for me. So I'm kind of here to talk about the surrounding things and a little bit about how the story was carried out. The stuff about Wally West, you got to go to the other guys. Go ahead, Evan.
Right.
I was about a week late in reading this, so I saw Tom King had gotten death threats. Wasn't completely sure how managed to avoid the spoilers, but I don't think the people who sent him death threats realized what Tom King's job was before he wrote comics.
Yeah.
He worked for the CIA. And that's where he got the idea from this story, was the idea of people dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. So it's terrible to send anybody death threats over a fictional character. I do understand the frustration, because I actually, for a while, had a literal arch enemies list that only consisted of the U.S. Census Bureau website, which is terrible if you want to actually find information, which I had to do for work, and Brian Michael Bendis, because he killed Alpha Flight off panel.
Yes, thank God. Thank God. Nobody gives a crap about Alpha Flight.
Well, apparently Evan does.
I do. Although I did hear on the Civil War II podcast you saying Canada itself does not.
Alpha Flight. I say it every podcast. It will be true.
I understand, but I mourned Alpha Flight. Of all the comic book writers and people you're going to send death threats to, the guy who worked for the CIA, really? That's the guy you want to threaten?
Yeah, have we seen any of these death threats though? I mean, I don't think we've seen any of them.
I think
it's very easy.
I think a death threat to Tom King is giving him an 8 out of 10.
An 8 out of 10, right?
My God.
Yeah. Your book was average. Wait a second. No,
While we were getting the history of the Flash lesson, I went looking for them. It's the one image that's like half crossed out. I don't know what was said, but all you get is Tom King's reaction to, I write comic books. Someone didn't like my story. They threatened to kill me over it.
Yeah.
And, he's reporting to Twitter. That's the only thing I've ever seen. Yeah.
Because I'm guessing he didn't get any. It's so easy to say. I could tell you I got death threats from a review I wrote. Who's going to tell? You're going to call me a liar? I mean, this is bullshit.
What's that going to do to the book as well? I mean,
it's going to make it go up, because folks are going to want to run out and see what the big hubbub's about.
So Tom King is a guy. It's the only reason we're talking about it.
Tom King's a guy who brought bodyguards with him to Comic-Con because he was scared for his life. This is a dude who has cried wolf time and time again. And it's just like, okay, put up or shut up. Show us these threats, because then we'll ostracize whoever's threatening you. We're on your side. We don't want death threats out here. Show us the death threats, and we'll know who's doing it, and we'll know what they're saying. But it's just so easy to say, oh yeah, somebody threatened my life.
I want to hop in here. I just want to hop in here because you mentioned the whole Comic-Con thing. One of the articles I read, it said, this isn't the first time King has dealt with death threats. At last year's San Diego Comic-Con, King tweeted that he was traveling with a bodyguard after receiving threats in response to Batman 50. That was Mark Radulich, by the way, which advertised the wedding
bodyguard?
Mark Radulich was the one. He was upset, which advertised the wedding between Batman and Catwoman, but delivered Catwoman leaving Batman instead.
Oh, haha.
Okay. So anyway, so Tom King's posing beside this big dude, right? It says this is his bodyguard, something along those lines. And then some other guy, apparently that was working at the con or whatever, calls him on it and says, this guy's not a bodyguard, he's Dave. He helps run Fan Expo in Toronto. He's described by those who know him as a big teddy bear of a man. He's as much a bodyguard as Batman is Catwoman's husband. So that was... So either way, I found that and I was like, oh, that's kind of suspect. And I saw the tweet that you're talking about, Mark, where, a bunch of stuff was crossed out. So I did, in my 10 minutes, 15 minutes of internet research, I couldn't find the thread either. Now, I don't know if that's because Tom was like, well, look, I'm not going to put anybody's name out there on blast so everybody else can go and just attack them, or if it's fabricated. I have no idea one way or the other. I do understand, though, you do say that you get death threats. Your sales are probably going to go up for that next issue. It's going to bring a lot of attention to that title.
And it gives us an opportunity to virtue signal really, really hard. So that's good, too.
Let me add this one thing, and then, if you want, Jesse, we can move on from this. I don't want to spend the entire, 2 hours just talking about the guy's make-believe death threats. If you Google just Tom King death threats, it seems like it seems like this was a thing during the Batman 50 with the wedding and the reaction to that. That's most of what comes up. The only thing that comes up with Heroes in Crisis is that one tweet. So, I don't know. I'm not on the guy's Twitter, but...
Well, it seems like people do send out death threats or very much overreact to a lot of things.
Yeah.
These days.
Comic book fans are a passionate group, let's be honest. So, when you start breaking the furniture, people get irritated. But, King has got a history of blazing trails. So, his whole agenda is, number one, he takes these characters. He loves to stick obscure characters in, which this book is littered with, from Gunfire to Lagoon Boy right on down. And then he likes to take some key characters, kill them off, shatter the furniture, and then he walks away unscathed and leaves a disaster for the next creative team to pick up on. That's his history, man. It's every single time. So that's why people are so irritated with King.
And he just recently got pulled from, well, I don't know if he got pulled or if he decided this, but I think
he got hired to write a movie.
Yes, he now has other projects. That's his.
He's working on the Eternals.
Oh, I might go see that movie 100 times just so they can keep him in Hollywood.
Don't dare give him 8 out of 10.
Oh my God, the Eternals made $3 billion weirdly in one state.
In Arizona. What?
Yeah.
Hollywood, please keep him.
Comicbook.com, I quoted this here. It says, so it's 2019 and it's comics, so you've been getting death threats from Wally West fans and all the craziness that comes with a major change like this in the modern social media era. He says, I don't think I get death threats from Wally West fans. I get a lot of hate from Wally West fans, which of course, I understand that, and that makes total sense to me, okay? The death threats were from people whose mind were a little thicker than that. It wasn't sound mainstream fans sad about Wally West. It was people who were crazy that I think just were taking it out on me at the moment. So
okay. Let me just say this: there are billions of people on this planet. Even if you took 1% of billions of people and say these are the nuts. These nuts also have cell phones and Twitter accounts. I mean, it's kind of a nothing thing to say, oh my God, Crazy Pete must sent me a hate-filled message. Well, yeah, anybody can. The bar is low. The threshold of entry is very, very low for a nut to send you a hate something or other.
So anyway, okay, so we covered the Tom King thing. Evan Bevins, tell me about your thoughts of what went down with Wally West in this story.
Well, we're not on Lagoon Boy yet?
No, buddy, we're saving the best for last.
All right, now, okay, I'm going to say something that I think is controversial, and I'm prepared for the hate mail.
Oh boy,
I liked it.
Attack!
Well, like I said, I completely get people not liking it with Wally. My initial reaction when I thought they'd killed him off was, oh, good, DC's killing Hope again. Now, whether you like what they did with Wally and relegating him to obscurity and just not having a place for the character, or not making a place for the character, because good writer can spin straw into gold with all kinds of characters. His family doesn't exist anymore. Well, his wife does. She just doesn't know him. He lost his kids. That's going to mess somebody up. So the logic that King followed, I understood. I didn't understand the time travel thing, like you, Jesse. But I had just enough to, I can think this to death, or I can go, oh, okay, time travel happened. I understand all the logic that went into it. I am really looking forward to. They just announced Flash Forward, where Scott Lobdell, who is more often than not one of my favorite writers, is going to do 6 issues on where Wally goes from here.
Yeah,
that could be a train wreck. That could be awesome, or it could be really mundane, or somewhere along that spectrum. But I understand why Wally West fans didn't like it. Can't fault them for that. But for me, it worked.
Do you think this is one of those Emerald Twilight moments where Hal Jordan flips his stuff and goes and becomes a villain and is almost broken for?
I don't think so, because Wally is mainly in superhero jail at the end because of framing people and covering it up. he didn't intentionally kill anyone. I don't understand how the Speed Force, suddenly becomes deadly. I've, seen some people point that out.
Yep.
I get that. I mean, every superhero's powers works however the current writer says they work. I understood how Wally got there, and I think the point that the story was trying to make, if you get overwhelmed, if you fall down, if you really screw up, you're not broken and beyond hope or redemption. And so I don't think Wally's anywhere near where Hal Jordan was.
Yeah.
But of course, then he had a magic yellow bug making him do evil things 10 years later. So no, I think Wally's that far gone. I think the point of the story was, here's someone who something bad happened. It overwhelmed him. He didn't get help, but now he's willing to pay the consequences. So from that regard, I think it worked.
I want to interject something here. I feel like this series started off in Tom King's mind as an exploration of PTSD and the cumulative damage that heroes suffer in the line of duty. Chris Bailey, and I, we're talking back and forth on Twitter about, like, you could have used so many other heroes besides Wally West when talking about the amount of stuff they've seen and done that would have caused post-traumatic stress disorder. And I feel like he submitted a script to DC and be like, nobody's fighting in this. like he didn't have a lot of action in it. It was just like this exploration of this mental illness, and DC kind of gave him like go back and rewrite it and give do comic book stuff. And his idea was, fuck it, I'll just make Wally West kill a bunch of people and we'll do a whodunit with Harley Quinn and Booster Gold.
Yep, I think you hit it right on the head.
According to the wiki, I believe this is where I pulled this from. According to King, the idea for Heroes in Crisis was conceived in 2016 after he suffered from a panic attack and went to the hospital, and his grandmother, who raised him, died on the same day. King had to go through therapy, after which he decided to use what he learned in a DC comic. The homestead of Sanctuary on the cover of Heroes in Crisis #1 is modeled after his grandmother's house as a tribute to her. So, Mark, the treatment of PTSD in this comic, because that's one of the key phrases. PTSD was used over and over, and a lot of people that I'd heard talk about this. Do you feel that was represented well here with Wally West? And do you see stuff like this? Because you are the LCSW, sir.
I feel like it was barely touched on. This was a murder mystery that happens to have PTSD as one of its themes. I don't feel like it was touched on enough. I feel like it was more focus on the whodunit and the resolution of the whodunit than there was on the exploration of their psyches. Maybe I'm misremembering, and if you guys have read it more recently than I, you can either agree or disagree. But I feel like Arkham Asylum dealt better inherently with mental illness than this does. This kind of dips its toe in, kind of says PTSD is a thing. What if Heroes had it, then created one incident where it creates a comic book type action sequence, and then it's kind of just forgotten about. And we're back to other things.
Mm-hmm. You're right. It's very superficial here, where Arkham Asylum was more of an exploration of different sort of psychological maladies. But this was it felt like you were like skimming the top off of a pool with this one a little bit. It was like all the very obvious things that were the obvious things that a superhero might have trouble with. I mean, you had the Batman confessional where he's like, I have sidekicks who died. It's like, well no shit. I mean, that's we know this. This is your deep... this is like dollar store psychology here. This is Psych 101. Superman going, am I Superman or am I Clark Kent? Well, yeah, we all know that. I mean, that's just the most basic stuff in the world. The usage of PTSD was kind of a cheap pop here. I think it wanted people to feel smarter by reading it, and it didn't do enough service to it in order to pay that off.
I think you had Tom King, who's got like a surface level understanding of DC as it is when it comes to external characters, and I think you get to see this on full display here. So the confessionals, I think, really tell a tale of what he actually knows about the character. So, the like Booster Gold, what does he repeat over and over? He's the hero that nobody really knows. You know what I mean? He's the most famous guy nobody really knows about. And I mean, that is so basic. That is from his first comic book series that he ever had.
That was his tagline.
That's what I'm saying. But that's basically what he's going on here. That's what he knows about Booster Gold to write this character. Like, it's really surface level. I think when you look at this comic and you take a look at what it's about and it's studying mental illness, I think it's a little bit meta when you think about the mess that DC has made with Wally West in particular. And you take a look at, he's the one who goes crazy. crazy and he's seeking treatment, but he's seeking treatment because his character is so screwed up that you can relate. If you're a DC fan, you understand that, man, Wally has gone through some stuff. This guy doesn't know who he is. He doesn't even know where his family is. His wife doesn't know who he is. His children are missing in action. There's so much that happened to this character, and it just gets worse. And like Evan was saying, the deaths that come about, it's not even true to his character. I mean, the guy accidentally kills people in the beginning of this whole thing, but he goes through an unbelievable lengths to cover up the murders and free himself. You know what I mean? He uses time travel. He releases information to the public. He's framing people. It's this big elaborate plan that's so on Wally like. It's really, it basically puts the character in such a spot where he's almost irredeemable unless they break out the yellow worm again, the parasite. But who knows what'll happen? But I mean, they really did some bad damage here to Wally West, and that's the real shame of this whole thing. If I got to look at it from just a broad overview, but the thing, like I was saying, there's so much that you could have touched on in this book. Myself and Mark were talking about. I mean, just think about what it would be like if this was based around Batman and all the stuff that he's seen. How about Superman, who died, with Doomsday and all the stuff that he went through to come back? I mean, there's some real trauma that happens to these DC characters, and just to pick Wally through all that stuff is a curious statement here, I think.
So if you're playing Radulich and Broadcasting Bingo, go ahead and mark off wrestling reference. A better one to look at, I think, in terms of how this should have been structured narratively, were the Mick Foley interviews with Jim Ross. Those start off, and this is the mistake that Tom King makes. There's too much of the gimmick of using the confessional, and a lot of those, it almost seemed like it was jokes. I kind of laughed at a few of them. If you're going to do this sort of thing, you narrow your focus to one or two characters, and you do more with those confessionals. And so I'll go back to Mick Foley. For those who either didn't see it or just don't remember this, they did 3 interviews of fairly decent length with Mick Foley in the Mankind character. And Mankind is telling Jim Ross these stories, drawing from the life of Mick Foley. And they build and they get more revealing, and at the end of it, Mankind goes berserk and attacks Jim Ross and then runs off set, like frightened of himself as to what he's just done. That's how you do this. That's not what Tom King did here. Tom King kind of focused in every other direction other than Wally, and then you get the reveal, and then it's like, you didn't take me on any kind of a journey here. Like, basically, the story revolves around Harley Quinn and Booster Gold. It doesn't revolve around Wally, and so that's another reason why I think a lot of people were pissed. It was like, well, if you're gonna do that to a beloved legacy character, at least, like, let's build this up over time, and then, rip the carpet out from under him. Not, it'll be the second time I've made this joke this week, not the Lewis Black bit on quail hunting where you're walking a line and you shoot the guy next to you, which is what I feel like happened here.
Maybe I'm a simple man, Mark, but you know what? I do like linear storytelling. So, I like a story to go, with a flow forward. This seems like someone took the script of Heroes in Crisis, tore it up in a plastic bag, and then started retrieving parts and tried to piece it back together, because it seems so disjointed that it becomes an unpleasurable read. I mean, literally, it's so all over the place that you don't know what's happening, what's the sequence of events. And, I think it's supposed to be smart and, some really clever writing, but it just comes off to me as annoying. And if you're reading it just single issues every month, it's just a pain in the ass to read. Now, I just sat down and I read all 9 issues again yesterday, and it made a lot more sense in succession. But,
yes,
reading it single issues month to month, man, this was a chore.
I'm wondering if they would have been better served having Harley and Wally go on this mission together, and then Wally doesn't know he's the one that kills him because he's the other copy or something along those lines. You know what I mean?
Could be.
I thought they were going to make that be what happened with Booster.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, even though the Wally thing didn't bother me as much as some people, in the back of my mind I was like, oh, please don't ruin Booster for me. So I totally understand, because pre New 52 Booster, Jeff Johns started the Booster Gold series, and then Dan Jurgens, who created Booster, came on, and I think Keith Giffen did it for a while, and they took Booster from a joke to legit superhero whose cover was that he was still a joke. And that version of Booster, except for some weird time travel stuff that I couldn't follow, is gone in New 52.
I'm a huge JLA or Justice League fan from the 80s, and you know what? A big part of that was Booster and Beetle. One of the redeeming qualities, and yes, I'll actually point out something that I like about this book, Bros Before Heroes. I loved seeing Booster Gold and Beetle just do their thing, man. You know, when he broke Booster out of the jail with the bug, and the boys hid away, and you know they drank beer and ate pizza, and they were in hiding, and they had their boots off. That is my Booster and Beetle right there.
Yes,
and that's one thing that I could say. Yeah, you know what? This is what I like about these characters. They're just good time characters. I was having fun for the first time in this book. Blue Beetle is another character, Ted Kord especially, that DC has done so much to take away from you, especially after he was killed, that, you know, just to see Blue Beetle and Booster back in action, the blue and gold, man, that was one of the highlights for this book for me, for sure.
I still don't understand why Blue Beetle's back, but I don't care.
As long as he's back.
You know, even if we just take Wally out of this whole Sanctuary thing is just, I feel like it's kind of a folly to like, we're crossing streams here and like doing like very real psychological trauma, maladies, all that stuff. And we're bringing the fictional element in, and we're trying to have this marriage, but it doesn't work because you can't. I mean, we went through Wally West's origin here. The dude has died a half dozen times. He's been sent to different universes. He's had his family die. These heroes, they've seen the end of the world. If we're going to start to examine them psychologically, they should all be cowering under their beds from what they've seen. I mean, let's take Superman for a second. Superman can hear everybody's cry for help. Like you can see a solicits, like, you know, Action Comics number 1015. Superman saves a bus full of nuns in Nebraska, but here's the dying cries of an orphanage in flames in Florida. You know, because he can't be everywhere at once. Mm-hmm. So just the trauma of even doing his job to the best of his abilities, he's still letting people down knowingly. So he should be fractured, broken, destroyed. It shouldn't be some stupid gimmicky bullshit 9-panel grid. Look at me, Alan Moore. Here's a confessional. It should be a dude who is like literally chewing his fingernails off, cowering in the corner of a room, because that's a lot of crap. And
or at the very least, he should be drinking heavily.
Absolutely.
Superman 3.
Yay!
They made 3 of those? I didn't. I just found out they made 1.
Oh no!
Forgot about Sheehan over there.
I just found out they
made 1. Biting my fist right now.
Is that the one with creepy Brad Wilson in it?
Yes. It is.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Okay, good. At least I got that one.
And Richard Pryor.
There you go. If
I ever get to pitch something to DC, it's going to be New 52 Gus Gorman. But that's not.
Yes, please. Did you hear that, DC? Gus Gorman.
Is that Richard Pryor?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll do that too. Yeah, I just think the entire idea of the Sanctuary is just, it's not good. I mean, I just read the entire thing over this morning, and I'm thinking this isn't, insofar as a story, it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, I'd put it above Superman Grounded, for instance, but which isn't saying much. But it's, if it didn't include these characters, if it was like, you know, like Jeff Lemire has that Black Hammer universe. Mm-hmm. If this was like in Black Hammer or something, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool, you know. But we have almost a century of history with these characters, and we've seen everything they've gone through. No matter what has been in continuity, out of continuity, still on the table, off the table, whatever. These people are so fractured and broken that it should take just a little bit more than slumming it in a cottage with some robots talking into a camera. You know, and the thing of it is, you know, we're suspending our disbelief to believe, you know, a man can run through time, but this is like my bridge too far. And I hate to go on tangents, but you know what I do. I've been here enough that you know that I do that. There was, in the Golden Age, you had, you know, World War II. Why didn't the superhero stop Hitler, right? So you have Roy Thomas, who says, well, he has the Spear of Destiny, and if any of the heroes go into Germany or occupied Europe, they'll become a zombified Hitler follower. So that's the way that they got around that. You know, that's a way to kind of mix real world with the fantastic world, where they don't have to meet, and there's a reason behind why they don't. This here is, you know, like we're peeling back these layers that we really should have stopped 5 layers ago. We shouldn't be getting these psychological analysis of these characters because they don't make sense, because they are just so broken. That there is no going back.
Well, if you're gonna do it, then really do it. Give me several issues of Wally exploring the pressure he's under, having died, his comparisons to Barry. Give me as a narrative device him exploring his anxieties. Okay. Don't do it this way. Don't focus so much on the whodunit. And that's what I was saying before. And then all of a sudden, there's this deep exploration of someone's anxieties, of their psychology. It's like, well, that kind of comes out of left field because you really weren't doing that before. They don't do this so much anymore, but I remember when I first started working in correctional healthcare, I would have these situations. Now, if you're dealing with somebody who's trying to recover therapeutically, they're seeking therapy or whatever, this is a process that takes time. Cognitive behavioral therapies, explorations, talk therapy, these are all things that take time, several sessions, and long sessions at that. But I would hear from these deputies, like, so-and-so's having a crisis, go fix it. Like he's broken, like I'm gonna be a mechanic, just tighten some bolts. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. I can't just go in and fix the situation in the 30 seconds you're gonna give me with this guy throwing poop. So, and I bring that up.
A Detective Chimp reference?
It is not, oddly enough. Detective Chimp got more personality than some of these guys. But that kind of seems like the way this was written. It was as if to say, I don't really need to explore the finer points of PTSD and anxiety, psychosis, etc. I can just, again, dip my toe in, just give him a little nibble, because really all people care about is the bang, boom, punch. And I was like, well, okay, but you're doing a disservice to the topic of mental illness, number one. Number two, you're not really adding to your story then.
I think you made a really good point. You were talking about how it should have been something that really they should have dove deep into with Wally. And really the only people that are really familiar with all of the struggle that Wally West has gone through to get to the point in 2019 are those people that love Wally. Those fans who were behind Wally West from day one, or when they picked up a comic book and saw he was the Flash and they were his Flash. Those are the ones that are attached to this character, and they all know the history. Me coming into this, I didn't know everything that Chris laid out there for me until tonight. Maybe some of those things were, like I said, big milestones, but I really didn't know a lot about this character. And this story doesn't give me, other than just a mention about how he had lost his family, the fact that he watched these tapes and saw what all the other heroes went through. Imagine somebody picking this event up and this is their first comic, okay?
They stop reading comics.
That's a scary thought, because you're like, you have to at least try and get across the magnitude of what Wally West has gone through in the past. And it doesn't feel like that was done. That, again, I'm echoing what you all have said on here. It was just, here's the confessionals. Imagine how short this story would have been if they would have just took all the confessionals out of here. First off, it was a breezy read in the first place. Breezy, I said. Breezy. But it was a very quick read. You could get through this in legit probably an hour to an hour and a half, all 9 issues.
I did it in an hour this morning.
I want you to compare that to Crisis on Infinite Earths, okay? And then you might be able to understand where people are kind of upset with the fact that, number one, this carries the word crisis in the title. If you're comparing the two, there's no comparison. That was world-shattering stuff that happened back in Crisis on Infinite Earths. In this, it's the exploration of a very, very personal level of one hero and the actions that happen. Let me tell you real quick, just before I turn it over, we'll do our talking points and our final thoughts, and we'll get out of here. Where this crossed the line for me in regards to Wally West, I think it's the fact that he killed himself and committed murdercide. Okay, the part of his plan was to go into the future and kill himself 5 days out and bring his own body back so he could avoid being fingered as the culprit.
What caused him to break down and seek out these confessionals that were supposed to be destroyed was he didn't believe it was real. He thought he was broken, he was alone, he was the only person who had this problem.
Okay,
that he wasn't only not living up to Barry, Perry, he wasn't living up to anybody. And then he realized that he lost control. He, killed all these people. He didn't want to go back in time and undo it because that's what Perry did that caused Flashpoint and New 52. Mm-hmm. So he said, and even though, like I said, I liked it, it's a bit of a reach, that he framed Booster and Harley to give him time to get the information out, to let people know, hey, your heroes are suffering, but they are being treated, and so that people who were like him would know that they weren't alone. And then he came back to tell, oops, I just killed a bunch of people, Wally, to kill him and then go do all this stuff that he did to try to save things or, bring back the one person he was able to, Poison Ivy. I gave myself a headache just trying to explain that.
Yeah, I just got a nosebleed. Ow.
I think there's a lot to be said about the whole killing yourself thing. I think there's some meta stuff going on there, especially with the PTSD talk and all that. That right there, I was like, man, I don't know. That's some personal level, really deep stuff in regards to this character that, again, you can't just wipe away anymore.
I don't think statistically PTSD leads to suicide. That's more of like a schizophrenia issue, but I would have to go do some digging.
I agree with that being hard to swallow, but keep in mind, and I didn't notice this at first, but he never actually killed himself, because it does say that Booster and Blue Beetle and Harley and Batgirl intervened the time before that too, but he had to keep the loop going and make his 5-day younger self think that he was going to kill himself, but they didn't change anything. That's what always happens. So he came back thinking he was going to do that, but he never actually did it. I know. Or at least that's how I understood it. Let's put it that way.
The ending of this story was so convoluted and so hard for me to follow, figure out what's going on. It would probably take me 3 reads to actually maybe comprehend it, and maybe talking to Evan on for about another hour.
But Jesse, how does that make you feel?
All right, Hero. Let's hear your talking points and final thoughts.
Yeah, so you know what? So there was some good stuff within this. Like I said, I think the entire thing that really bothered me was once again DC's obsession with breaking down poor Wally West. So they put him in a corner again. Hopefully, this Flash Forward series that's coming out soon is going to put the furniture back together that Mr. King just shattered all over the floor. Some of the things that I liked, like I said, the Blue and Gold team back together. Loved the Booster Gold and Beetle interaction. Could not stand the Harley Quinn versus Booster Gold thing. This guy's got Legion technology in that suit. He's got shields. He should have just been able to, give this lady the flick, and she should have been toast over with Mr. J hanging out in the balcony somewhere. Some of the confessionals were kind of cool, only for the simple fact that you got to see some really obscure characters. Like you got to see Commander Steel. But what was hilarious about it is, like I said, Tom King seems to have only a surface level, what these characters are about. So he just goes, Commander Steel, the indestructible man. It's like he only read the crib notes on these things. Gunfire, I am the weapon. You know what I mean? Like, it's very basic. I will give a shout out to his callback to the Protector, and I'm sure Chris Sheehan will have some info on the back history of the Protector. But the Protector, just say no, which if you know anything about the character of Protector, and I'll leave this for Sheehan and his wrap up, but that's just hilarious to me, some of these things. So the confessionals were cool. The way they went about the whole convoluted, disjointed story was a chore to read, but overall this one lands with a bit of a thud. There is some good stuff in here. I think this story will be pretty well forgotten within the next 6 months, honestly. I don't think there's anything that happened in here that is anything earth-shattering that can't be fixed. And plus there was one thing, and explain this to me. I think that, was this series supposed to go 9 issues? Because it certainly seems like they're just adding on pieces to drive some sales here. Like they had
extended it at least 1 issue.
I think it was supposed to go 6 or 7 initially.
They had a whole issue of Narc fighting a dinosaur or something. Like,
I love
what?
that.
And then quoting Keith, which
yes,
I don't know who the hell Narc is. I was just like, okay, well, things have happened here with this guy. I don't know what's going on, but whatever.
I think think the Mitch Gerads ones were the added issues. The Clayman ones were the ones that were supposed to just be the series.
And on another level, just take a look at the overall production of it. I mean, if you look at a lot of the covers, I mean, a lot of the covers really stand out. They did a great job of trying to hook you in, especially if you saw some of the variants. The artwork, man, I know that they call out 2 particular artists in general, but there's got to be at least 10 different artists on this thing. There's from panel to panel, from page to page. You can see like there's a new artist like popping in, like doing a different panel, or characters look a different way from time to time. It's up and down like a yo-yo. I think overall, artistically, that the book is a smash hit, in my opinion. I really like the depiction of the characters. But so in wrap up for me, I would call this a thumbs down overall. I think they did damage to the characters. I think there's some fun stuff in here. It's a return to just having Wally West back in the comic, I guess, is a win, and seeing Booster and Beetle back is also a win for me as well. So that is the tale of the tape.
All right. Mark Radulich, tell us about it. Talking points, final thoughts.
What I loved about this, I thought that they started off with some juicy stuff here. It's classic detective noir. 2 characters think the other one committed a vicious murder, and then they realize that they have to work together to try to solve the mystery of who done it. That was enough. That was all this needed to be.
Yes.
If you're it's kind of like a pick one, or if you're gonna do both, do it better, do it longer. I feel like they had a germ of a really good idea here, and they just handled it wrong, and they didn't have enough paper to really flesh this out the way it needed to be with all of the balls they had in the air. I think if they had just stuck with just the whodunit story, I think it's a tighter, much more interesting story. I like the combination of I'm with Chris Bailey. I don't understand how Harley Quinn, the gymnast, is able to take on every character in the DC universe, but we're woke, girls rule, cool. So
that's gonna get you some hate, brother.
But no, I like, that's fine. I don't really care about stuff like that. They lost me when the Ewoks took out the Empire. I gave up on fiction logic after that.
Celebrate the love. Yup.
So, but I like the interactions between Harley Quinn and I like when she kind of goes back and remembers she used to be a psychiatrist. I think that's all fun stuff. So then that whole group there of her, Batgirl, Booster Gold, and Blue Beetle. I kind of liked this oddball team trying to figure this thing out, and I'm actually okay with Wally West doing having been the one that killed everybody and then tried to cover his tracks. But again, had it been left at that, it was just like, I had a moment, I fucked up, I tried to cover it up, and you caught me. Put the cops on, coppers. Like, okay, cool. 4 issues. That's all you needed. 4. Get all this extra other shit out of there. Though I will say this, as far as the confession goes, my favorite panel in the entire book is Batgirl saying nothing, getting up and showing the bullet wound, and then turning around and showing the exit wound from when the Joker shot her in the Killing Joke. I was like, yeah, good stuff.
Do you know there was outrage over those panels? People were complaining that they tried to make her look too sexy, and that they were, it was just an excuse to have her to pull down her pants. I swear to God.
Batgirl, your bullet hole showing. We live in a stupid world.
Oh boy. All right, Evan Bevins, Lagoon Boy, and the rest of the story, and your final thoughts.
Okay, well, I am not going to have as exhaustive a history of Lagoon Boy, and as awesome a history, let me say, as we had for Wally West. I just met him in Young Justice. He was a dude that looked like Merman. He called himself Lagoon Boy, and he owned it, even though he basically had the same powers as the Blowfish Avenger from the first episode of the Tech animated series.
Okay.
And I love D-list heroes.
That's the truth.
R.I.P. Lagoon Boy. I'm going to pour out a Gatorade for him after we're done. But let's see. There were a couple things. First of all, somebody mentioned the art. Clayman was the main artist on this, and I think just about every issue has a gorgeous splash page where no one is fighting. And I remember one of the, not a DC comic, but one of the Revelation comics for me was Uncanny X-Men number 297, where the X-Men stood around and talked, and I found it fascinating. And I'm like, wait, nobody fought. Can you do comics like that? So I appreciated that. As for Harley being able to beat everybody, like I said, every character is as capable capable and as powerful as the writer writing that issue. I did like the exchange where she took down the Trinity in no time flat, or not took them down, but stopped them in their tracks. And Superman goes, Bruce, she's as good as you. And Batman starts arguing. Wonder Woman's like, now's not the time, boys. It reminded me, a friend of mine, I want to drop a name. I don't know if you guys know, James Patrick lives around here, has written a couple comics for DC, and years ago he did a Harley Quinn one-shot. The idea was it's Valentine's Day and nothing's going to keep Harley away from the Joker. After it came out, he was telling us about some of his ideas for it, and one of them was that the JLA came to take Harley back to Arkham, and she took them all down and escaped. And eventually that's not the direction he went. But after I read that issue, I sent him a message and I'm like, dude, they just used your Harley idea. And that reminds me of that thing you told me about Harley all those years ago. And I thought it was neat with Batgirl saying, you're better than they think you are. So, whether you agree with them trying to ratchet Harley up like that, I thought it was an interesting approach to it.
I look forward to the one shot of Harley versus Galactus.
What's the craziest company crossover ever?
She'd win.
Keep in mind, Galactus has, in continuity, been defeated by both Dazzler and Squirrel Girl.
Oh,
Terrific.
But, Squirrel Girl's totally legit. She can't be beaten. There you go, Jesse. I worked Squirrel Girl in.
You did, too. That's one reference. That's all you get tonight.
Now, about Super Pro. No, Narc, this was the only comic I ever read with Narc. I want to do more with Narc. My notes say, this caveman is making me feel stupid. I enjoyed that, just kind of subverting what you expect with that character. I did enjoy it. To me, it was like the spiritual sequel to Identity Crisis, which was a whodunit that was about more than the whodunit. I would say Identity Crisis did it much better, but I did like it. I can't argue with any of the criticisms about it was only surface PTSD and things like that. I'm not sure how much more they could have done. I think there's something to be said for, hey, here's this issue, but not that it would have been bad for them to explore it more or better or more thoroughly, but it's just like, hey, here's a thing that's real, but ultimately it's about superheroes, and we're also going to throw in some sweet one-liners. Oh, the last thing I noted, and then I'll shut up. End of issue 5, the Harley confessional, where she talks about the joke. Mr. J said, "Why did the chicken cross the road to get to the moron's house?" Then he said, "Knock, knock." I said, "Who's there?" And he said, "The chicken." Then he started hitting me. That, I think, should be posted as a response to every meme or tweet where it's like, Harley and Joker have the best love story. Forget Romeo and Juliet. It's like, no, they don't. You remember when Suicide Squad came out and people were suddenly like, hey, this Harley-Joker relationship isn't very healthy.
No.
Like, it never, ever was.
Nope.
Going back to the animated series. So I did like that. Like I said, I agree that it could have been done better, or maybe it didn't go deep enough, but overall, it worked for me.
Okay, very good. All right, Christian, take us home here, sir.
Okie dokie. I was going to mention Harley beating the Trinity, which I thought was a little silly, especially with the swiftness in which she did it.
Chris, that's woke.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm still asleep. I don't know. But the confessional scenes here, for what they were, I think, and I think I've used the word conflate 3 or 4 times here already, but Tom King conflates the use of a 9-panel grid with intelligent writing, because that's what Alan Moore did. And he uses 9-panel grids in almost everything he's worked on. And there could be solicits to, like, Mr. Miracle number 2. It's like Scott Free turns his head from left to right, $3.99, 4 variant covers. But I'm not a fan of the 9-panel grid, and I'll kind of close with that too. I liked seeing the Protector there, even though we've said surface level a lot, and it was very surface level. The just say no thing. The Protector is, I'm sure you guys know, he was the replacement for Robin in the New Teen Titans Drug Awareness one shots back in 1983, 1984, and it was because the first one was a Keebler production, and Robin's likeness was owned by Nabisco at the time, so they had to have George Perez Perez draw a really goofy purple costume over all the Robins, and that's how we got the Protector. And he's only appeared, I think he only appeared in like a Titans annual, like as a funny haha around the turn of the century, and then now. So we haven't seen him very much. So it was pretty neat to see him there. Wonder Girl. Now to give Tom King credit for something that isn't surface level. Wonder Girl, Donna Troy, that is, her spiel is about being, maybe she feels like she's a mistake of a writer. She feels like writers are miscommunicating, and there's miscommunication that causes these weird anomalies, because Donna Troy is one of those anomalies. Wonder Girl was never a character. Wonder Girl that Bob Haney, the creator of the Teen Titans, saw was actually Diana, Wonder Woman, as a girl, but he didn't care. He took this Wonder Girl and made her a whole different character when it was only supposed to be Diana as a girl. So I thought that was very interesting on a meta level, because I don't want to spoil too much of Doomsday Clock here, but there is something about a metaverse being weaved throughout that. It's higher than the multiverse. It's the metaverse, which is to say the inside and the outside of the industry.
And somebody, Chris, speaking of that, just touch on that for 1 second. There's somebody who's very key to this story who alerts Dr. Manhattan of the incoming heroes that is about to stop him, which ties into this book. I will not spoil it any further. There you go.
Certainly. But the thing with like Wonder Girl saying that there are these weird anomalies because of miscommunication, I feel that is very meta. I feel like a lot of the knee-jerk reaction of the readership to this, myself included, I think that also kind of ties into the metaverse of the DC universe, because I went into this, I'm not a fan of Tom King. I thought the Vision was lazy. I thought the few issues I read of it, I thought Mr. Miracle was so slow, and I thought Batman was not very good, especially coming off of the Snyder run. So I was going into this with a bit of a chip on my shoulder. And then after reading the first issue and seeing the body count, I think I was just attuned not to like it, which is kind of ties in personally with like a meta level. If I see Tom King, I'm automatically going to be like, I'm probably not going to like that. And I'm going to look for reasons to justify my case. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a little bit interesting insofar as something I'm reading way too much into and nobody else has given a second thought to. The art was great. I thought the art was really good. And we mentioned Batgirl showing off her bullet wounds, and just as much non-use I have for this story, I'm a guy who appreciates lore, and I'm not someone who wants to sweep things under a rug. So you play the ball where it lands as a writer, as an artist, or as a fan. And if this is where Wally West is now, I have to accept it because I believe in following lore. Now we have Batgirl. She's still shot. The last creative team said that never happened. They said that was all like a mental thing, she was like a mental image projected into her to give her trauma. Because the Burnside Batgirl team said that didn't happen on their watch.
Good, they should all be taken out back and flogged.
Well, this is around the time of the Raphael Albuquerque variant cover, where the Joker is standing next to her, drawing a smile on her face for the Joker variant cover month, and people flipped their shit over it.
They did.
I do like the fact that there is still a bullet hole in her, instead of the Burnside crew saying no, that never happened on our watch. So, as a guy who likes lore, I'm happy that's there.
Okay. All right. Well, I would say that this brings our discussion right here on the Source Material Comics podcast about heroes in crisis to a close. And I want to thank my guests, and we're going to get into plugs. So let's start with Evan Bevins. Tell us what you got going on there, creative-wise, paper-wise. What's up?
Well, I do write a couple of columns about comic books for the Parkersburg News and Sentinel and Graffiti, a West Virginia entertainment publication. In the July edition, I'll have an article consoling people and trying to convince them it could be worse than Robert Pattinson playing Batman. 4 words, Batman as a Muppet. And then I do write a column as different movies and TV shows come out about the comics they're based on. So I've got one about Legion coming up, and somehow over the years I've never actually written a straight one about Spider-Man, so that'll be coming out around the time of Far From Home. Also do write or have written a webcomic about a support group for people with lame superpowers. not quite as traumatic as these guys. It's just a werewolf who can only be a superhero when there's a full moon, stuff like that.
Very good, very good. All right, we're going to throw it over to Hero.
All right, well, plugs. I'm glad you asked. If you want to follow up with me, check me out on the Twitter at Charlton_Hero. You can find me there. You can also hear my my blogging musings over on the Superhero Satellite, which is my site, and I'm always here hanging out, waiting in the wings of the interwebs, waiting for Jesse and Mark or Chris to ask me to come on. So I am here and available for your podcasting needs.
Oh, man, Chris Sheehan, tell us, update us number one with Reggie. Have you heard anything else from Reggie here?
Yes, everything is looking really, really good. I spoke with him for about a half hour just last night, and he's bored out of his gourd in the rehab facility, which is definitely a great alternative to what it could have been. He's got full mobility in one leg, and the other one is becoming stronger every day. So things are looking up. He's really chomping at the bit to get back into script mode for the Cosmic Treadmill podcast, which you could find all of our episodes at chrisandreggie.com on all the different places that you get noise. I think you'll be able to find us.
Podcoin.
What is a Podcoin? Can you explain that?
You can find the Cosmic Treadmill on Podcoin. Why just listen to podcasts when you can get paid to listen to one of the best comic podcasts I've ever heard? Have you heard me and Jesse do this shit? We are unprepared and don't know what we're talking about half the time. Go ahead and listen to the Cosmic Treadmill. They actually take notes and have a script.
There you go.
On Podcoin.
On Podcoin. I'll have to actually check what that is. So that's a good thing. I also do a daily blog. It's chrisisoninfiniteearths.com, where I look at a different DC comic every single day of the week. Going on 3.5 years of daily posts. Right now, I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern because I did return to grad school. So I am doing a chapter from Action Comics Weekly every single day. So you get 6 chapters of Action Comics Weekly. On the 7th day, they all get compiled. You get a nice little poll you can vote on if you care, or if you don't. Either way. But that's where you find me. Chris is on Infinite Earths, and chrisandreggie.com, on Twitter at Ace Comics.
Very good. All right, Mark Radulich, the schedule, sir.
Alrighty. This week on the Rattlism Broadcasting Network, tomorrow we'll be reviewing Toy Story 4. The day after, we'll be looking at Berserker by Amon Amarth. Then Jesse and I are going to get together and review the new Black Mirror, Hotsy Totsy. We take a break on Friday. Saturday, go ahead and check out Fighter Fest. That way you'll know what we're talking about when we review it on June 30th. In theory, July 1st, we'll be looking at Jessica Jones Volume 2, The Secrets of Maria Hill. I will be dragging an unwilling Robert Winfrey into reviewing Jessica Jones Season 3, the last of the Red Hot Marvel Netflix shows. And then Upon a Burning Body, Southern Hostility. For the love of God, make better videos, people. We'll review that on the Metal Hammer of Doom. Last week, we looked at Gotham Central Book 1 by Ed Brubaker. We reviewed Men in Black International. We looked at the new Rammstein, and then all of us nerds got together to yell, I say, at all of the people and their toxic fandoms. Yes, all of you. You're all guilty.
All right.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, I forgot the most important plug. Please go on, download to your mobile device Podcoin, Podcoin, Podcoin. You can check out their website, download their app. Again, you can find my podcast. You can find the Cosmic Treadmill. You can find all of the wrestling ones. You can find some of the 411 podcasts. Whatever podcast you listen to, it's all there on Podcoin. Why waste your time doing nothing listening to podcasts when you can get paid to listen to podcasts? You save up your points from the amount of podcasts you listen to. You can get gift cards to Starbucks or Amazon. You can do all kinds of things with it. Folks, what else are you doing when you're listening to a podcast? You're just sucking up battery life. Make that time worthwhile.
I'm on the lawn.
Hey,
you can do both. Maximize your time.
You can get paid to mow the lawn while listening to podcasts.
That's right. We claimed our podcast today, which means we are now a featured podcast on Podcoin. I want to thank all the people who checked us out and said, this is horse shit, and turned it off. That's fine. A listen's a listen.
Listen is a listen.
I still got credit for it. So I encourage you all to go out there, check out all the podcasts associated with this one on Podcoin. Delete your previous app. Get Podcoin. Podcoin.
Oh boy. All right. So Mark, I almost want to say you're not getting paid to show that, but actually, in fact, you are, because you are a user of Podcoin, because you can get paid to listen to podcasts while using Podcoin, right, Mark?
I did get paid listening to podcasts through Podcoin, Jesse.
Oh, okay. All right.
Our numbers shot up today like a damn rocket.
Unbelievable.
Because of Podcoin.
Oh, wow. All right, then.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe it or not, Evan, Podcoin. Let's get out of here. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Source Material Podcast. I want to thank my guest, Chris Sheehan. We got Chris Bailey, otherwise known as Hero. And then we have Evan Bevins and Mark Radulich. I'm Jesse Starcher. We shall be talking to you next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Podcoin.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
I'll never be enough for you. Sad ends, no friends.
So I'm going to keep getting laughs. I'm going to keep repeating it.
All right. Well, I just for the record, Mark, I was recording at that point in time, so you don't have to do it again when we start the podcast. All right.
I have to do it
No,
for
you
every
don't.
new person.
No, the new
Join the
person is not
podcast.
the audience. We don't need to do it again.
Has Evan quit the show yet?
Evan's like,
Not yet. No.
fingers on the hang up button. No, you're here for the duration, sir, until I release you. How's that?
Oh, it's like that, huh? Here's
So,
why I love Lagoon Boy.
oh boy.
He
So
looks like Merman from He-Man.
There's reason number one.
Yes, there's 76 of us here, and we need to talk about the death threats to Tom King.
This might become one if we say we don't like the story, because he conflates that shit all the time. He doesn't know the difference between a critique and a death threat.
Oh,
All right, shots fired.
You didn't ask me why we're doing this particular book.
Did I send you the format? Wait a second. Did you read the format? It's the question.
Oh God, no! I didn't do my schoolwork in school. I'm not starting now.
that because that beetle. Listen to me.
Are we snoring already?
I was not snoring, sir. I took a deep breath. Please continue.
It's like you sound like my wife. Every time I say anything with crisis in it, she's done.
Podcoin is the Pied Piper, and we have
Yeah?
take two.
Right.
You're gonna cut that, right? Here we
yeah.
go. Here we go.
Right now, you can save up to 50% off your Disney favorites. Save on plush, toys, clothing, and more at shopdisney.com. Just trying
What
to pay
the
the bills,
hell?
boys. Wait
Where
a second
did
here.
it come from?
Oh, wait. That's Disney Hero speaking there. Just trying to pay the bills. Are you listening, Disney? Oh, we'll take the checks.
Welcome to the Nation of Trolls podcast, everybody.
Oh boy.
By the way, if you would like to send me hate mail, please send it to @MarkRadulich on Twitter. I will dedicate an entire show to it. Harley Quinn can defeat Superman. I get it. #me too. I'm with it.
I don't know these people.
It's @MarkRadulich on Twitter, folks.
This is Alan.
Woo! Let's go!
Before the first pitch, he's at the top of his banking game. With the Wells Fargo mobile app, he's using Zelle to settle up with his friends for that hot dog and drink, and checking his account balances. For Alan, it's the game day bank. This is your right here, right now bank. This is Wells Fargo.
Zelle is available to United States bank account holders only. Terms and conditions apply. Message and data rates may apply. The Zelle service is property of Early Warning Services, LLC. Wells Fargo Bank N.A. member FDIC.
This is Alan.
Woo! Let's go!
Before the first pitch, he's at the top of his banking game. With the Wells Fargo mobile app, he's using Zelle to settle up with his friends for that hot dog and drink, and checking his account balances. For Alan, it's the game day bank. This is your right here, right now bank. This is Wells Fargo.
Zelle is available to United States bank account holders only. Terms and conditions apply. Message and data rates may apply. The Zelle service is property of Early Warning Services, LLC. Wells Fargo Bank N.A. member FDIC.